Hey you guys, so today I'm going to be doing a Q&A video. The weather is just perfect for it today. Yesterday, not so much. It was in the 90s, high humidity, classic New Jersey summer weather, really gross, but today is absolutely gorgeous. The only thing is the sun kind of moving around, so I may have to move around with it, so it's not in my face. But anyway, I printed some of your questions from the last 2 to 3 videos, and I'm going to jump right into them. So the first question is, always love your garden tours. You have a perfect voice for it. Thank you. Wonder how many plant varieties you have in your garden. It's a lot, I bet. So you are correct. I probably grow thousands of plant varieties. And I do have a running spreadsheet or plant inventory, that's what I call it, for all of the plants I grow or I have grown. And I do that for a number of reasons. First of all, is to kind of keep the plant inventory and to know what I have in my garden. Second is to refer to the names, because I do forget names all the time. Because they constantly come up with new varieties, and there's so many new varieties that it's kind of dizzying. And thirdly is to know what performed well in my garden. So as a landscape designer here in northern New Jersey, I like to recommend plants to my clients that I know did well in our area. And I make notes if something didn't do well, even though I gave it all the right conditions, and it just died. So I would not use that plant. And you know, different varieties of plants and different hybrids perform differently. They're just good eucharists and they're bad eucharists. It's just the way it is, and that's why a lot of places like Mount Cuba and Chicago Botanical Garden do trials, because they want to see how the plant performs and how tolerant they are of diseases. I also love to try different seeds every year, annual seeds and different bulbs, so I have a separate spreadsheet running for that. As an obsessed gardener, I want to grow all of the plants. I mean, you guys know, you go to the garden center and you want to buy all of the plants, but I realize with my limited space here, I garden on less than a half an acre. I only can grow so many plants. So what I have been doing in my last about 15 years of gardening, if I run out of space, I may just rehome a certain plant, give it to a friend, or maybe donate it to a public park, and then plant something new and something interesting that I would like to try. And my motto has kind of been, you know, I can grow all the plants, just not at the same time, because I don't have the space for it. Okay, so I already had to move because the sun started getting in my face. Plus there was a catbird behind me in the hedges. I don't know if you saw her. I think there is a nest somewhere here, so she started getting a little nervous and I want to give her some space. There was another catbird mama in our privet hedge. She made a nest, and 3 weeks ago when I was pruning the hedge, I noticed the nest with the eggs. So I actually stopped pruning, I dropped everything, and I said, I'll get back to it in 3 weeks. So the baby birds left literally yesterday, and I have been observing them all this time. They're like the cutest thing, but they finally left the nest, and I can continue with pruning the privet hedge. We have so many birds, it's unbelievable. But anyway, I'm going to move to the next question, and I feel at this pace I may not get to the end of this video. But anyway, the next question is, did you report the spotted lanternfly? We had some government officials here in my condo complex scouting the trees with binoculars, and he found some nymphs. We have quite a few large invasive tree of heaven trees, and they're one of the host plants, yes. They're going to be spraying in the fall, and I'm so upset. So spotted lanternfly is a very complicated issue, and in our area for the government, it's kind of old news, so they know it's here and they're everywhere here. In fact, this spring I went to one of the expos for landscape professionals, and it was a big issue that they were talking about it because it is affecting fruit, crops, and our food supply pretty much. So it's not just affecting a home gardener, it is on the commercial scale. I forgot to bring out the brochure that they gave out there at the expo. It basically kind of explains the life cycle of the spotted lanternfly, what you can do about it. There are obviously some sprays that you can use, both synthetic and organic. Again, just because something is organic doesn't mean it's safe, and organic insecticides affect our beneficial insects, so you have to be careful with spraying those. Our local insect companies actually are coming up with programs specifically designated to spotted lanternfly control because they are just everywhere. In fact, I think I've seen hundreds in my own garden this year. Thankfully, they're only infecting cucumbers, roses, and maples in my garden. But on a commercial scale, they can affect lots of fruit trees, walnuts, grapes, and 70 other species. So it is a big issue here in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, and a lot of other states on the East Coast. The one thing that you can do that is not spraying for like any insecticides is collecting the eggs in the fall. So if you can use a credit card or some hard tool to scrape off the egg masses of the trees, that it is extremely helpful because you're reducing population by hundreds. And the traps that people use around the trees, sometimes they may work, but they also trap a lot of beneficial insects. Again, it is a big issue, and there are a lot of universities and a lot of research is being done right now on how to deal with spotted lanternfly, but we here in New Jersey have been dealing with it probably for at least 5 years. All right, so the next question is, can I ask how you feel about the mountain mint? I recently saw that it makes a very pretty filler for a flower bouquet. I'm always worried about planting mint as I know how aggressive it can be. Would you recommend that I plant it in a container, or is it well behaved? Thanks so much. So mountain mint or pycnanthemum is not a true mint or mentha. I would never recommend that you plant a true mint in a garden because it just spreads way too fast. So the rhizomes are very long, and they could be up to 6 inches from the mother plant, and then they're another 6 inches. And next thing you know, it just covers a whole lot of area in one season in your garden. It smothers other plants, and it's really hard to deal with. So definitely put those in the pot. Pycnanthemums or mountain mints do not spread as fast. They're definitely not as aggressive, but it is an assertive plant. And I would say if you were to plant mountain mint in your garden, plant it with something that behaves similarly, like a Joe Pye weed, for example. They do spread, but not as fast. Also, there's a lot of different kinds of mountain mints. I have a threadleaf mountain mint that I planted 10 years ago, and it didn't go that far. So there is a different rates of growth for different mountain mints. And also it depends on your soil structure. If you have sandy soil, a clay soil, or a loamy soil, plants can spread quite differently in all of these different soils. But I never had pycnanthemums or mountain mints get out of control either in my own garden or in projects where I planted them. So the next question is more a comment/question. Your garden is so peaceful. I just love your style of gardening, Yulia. I love that maple tree. I agree vegetable gardening can be very challenging but very rewarding when it starts producing. Do your fish have a difficult time surviving your winters? How did they fare during the Arctic blast? It's so funny you asked that question because I'm sitting right next to the fish pond, and it's just so peaceful. I love it. It was one of the best decisions we made, as including a little pond in our garden. But pond does require maintenance, including maintenance in the winter. So what we used to do, we used to bring all of the fish inside the house. We had a 200-gallon aquarium, and it was lovely to see the fish in the winter inside the house. They're absolutely beautiful. But then it actually became a lot of work, both fishing the fish, moving it, cleaning the aquarium over the winter. So about 3 years ago, we decided to leave the fish in the pond. The pond is about 2.5 feet deep to 3 feet deep. And that is the thing. You have to have your pond be deep enough that it goes below the frost line. And when the ice gets really thick, I actually have a small heater that I put on top of the ice. So there is a hole in the ice for air exchange. And that is something to remember. I think a lot of fish perish because there's a lot of harmful gases that trap under the ice if there is no way for them to escape it. And during the Arctic blasts, we just kept that heater going and made sure that there is a lot of space around it so there is an air exchange. But other than that, over the last 3 winters, we really haven't had any losses. Yeah, it's actually wasn't as difficult as I thought. So I had to move positions once again. So you can see our lovely pond. There's actually another water lily. And this is the 4th time this summer. I've never had water lilies bloom so much. I think this one is finally maturing, because when you just buy them, they will produce maybe 1 flower, maybe 2. But when they're bigger, they will produce more flowers. I'm so excited about that. There's also this weird mushroom. I don't know what it is, but I'm just leaving it alone for now. But anyway, the next question is, won't your arborvitae, Thuya, create a lot of shade and take the moisture and goodness from both your garden and your neighbor's border? This is about those arborvitaes that I planted last fall, the American pillars. And arborvitaes in general are not competitive plants until they get really, really large. So we're talking like 20, 30 years from now. That's when their root system will become extensive enough to create a lot of competition with other plants. So I wouldn't worry about it for now. But the situation that you're talking about, the dry shade situation, is kind of my thing. It's my expertise, so to speak, because we have a lot of dry shade here in northern New Jersey, because we have a lot of shade trees like maples, birches. Oaks do not create as much dry shade as those other two. So I have been dealing with those a lot, both in my own garden and in my clients' gardens. So there's a list of very tough plants that can take dry shade, like geranium mycorrhizum, Solomon seal, helleborus, epimediums, and there's a number of other plants that will do well in that situation. But fortunately, I don't have to worry about it yet. And when that time comes, I'm not sure in 30 years we'll still be here, but I will have my plant list ready. The sun is chasing me again. It's already on the peacock orchids, which look beautiful, by the way. So I may have to move again in a few minutes. But let me cover this next question. Did you grow the cardoons from seed or as a plant? So I grew my cardoons from seed, and it's actually quite easy. I started them in February, like mid-February last year. And cardoons are biennials, so they put up their mass the first year, they overwinter, and then they bloom the following year. They are hardy to zone 6, I believe, but they kind of barely overwintered in my zone because of the Arctic blast that we had. But they made it and they bloomed and they look absolutely beautiful. I actually saw another question from someone in the zone 5, whether it is worth it for them to grow that plant in their zone because it doesn't overwinter and it will not bloom. I think you should still grow it, even as an annual. It's such a stunning, absolutely beautiful architectural plant. You can plant it in your vegetable garden to add a lot of interest and structure. You can add it to your border for a drama. And again, even if it doesn't bloom, it just adds that kind of conversation piece to your garden. I had to reposition one more time to answer this last question. So the question is, your garden is my most favorite garden in YouTube land. Thank you. But I cannot understand all of your garden spaces and how they come together. Can you do a drone shot of your property? So really good question. So our airspace situation is very complicated. We live about 20 minutes away from Newark Airport, and we get a lot of traffic from JFK as well. I'm sure you've heard planes in my videos many, many times. So to get a drone shot requires a license. So yeah, it's complicated. But what I try to do is I went to our second floor and I filmed our front yard, our side yard, and our backyard, so you can kind of get a feel of the lay of the land, so to speak. And I also made a quick sketch of our garden plan. And I will post that to the community tab so you can kind of study it a little bit and refer to that if you are just curious as to where things are. But the reason why I don't show our garden in garden tours all in one big swoop is because of our driveway. So we have this giant driveway that goes all the way from the road, and it segments our space in two spaces. And it goes all the way through the garden and goes into our garage. And ever since we moved to this house, this driveway has bothered me so much because it's so big. And it's about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. And just for your reference, I have designed gardens, entire gardens that are that size. So every time I look at that driveway, I think about all of the plants I could be growing in that space and all of the design ideas I could be trying out in that space. But over the years, I have been trying to come up with a design solution how to minimize its impact. And the perfect solution requires a very large budget. It requires either moving our garage or repositioning it somehow. And we don't have the budget at this time. But I could have waited for this perfect day where we could overhaul this entire space and make it perfect. And trust me, I have so many design ideas floating in my head about what I can do in this space if the driveway wasn't there. But I am glad that I did not wait for that perfect time where I could make this ideal, and I just kept on gardening regardless of this driveway of ours. And I'm so glad that I created these pockets of peace and joy over the years, and some of the plants are now mature, and I get to just live in this wonderful space and try different plants and experiment with different layouts. So I guess my message to you would be, even if you don't live in a perfect space right now, if you just have a small terrace, or if your garden is sloped, or if it's small, or maybe you have neighbors right next to you, just garden. You know, garden in a small space, have a container full of plants or a small water feature, whatever you can do. Just keep on gardening until you can get that, perfect space that we all think about that may not even exist. So yeah, I just, I kept gardening, and I kept planting things and just playing around in the garden with this driveway. And I know some people park on the street and they resurface their driveway and they make it something else. Unfortunately, in our area, we do have to park in our garage because we get a lot of precipitation. So we have to protect our cars from that. So yes, that is the reason why you never see our garden in this, entire space, because it's just aesthetically not attractive, and it does segment our garden into this two subspaces. Um, anyway, that is the answer to your question, and I hope I answered some of your other questions, that it made sense. And thank you so much, you guys, for hanging out with me today, for watching this video, and I hope you learned something new, and I will see you in the next one.